NASCAR Wire Services. Reid Spencer joins us.
Long-time
Reid.
friend of the show.
Hey, how are you?
We're good, Reid. How are you?
We're terrific, other than the fact that I can't figure out where the hell I am. But other than that, we're doing okay. Speaking of where the heck we are, you had a pretty busy weekend in Indiana. You had the Eldora race, and then you got to go over to Indianapolis. But talk to me first about Eldora and what your impression was of that whole deal.
Well, I'll tell you, Eldora was fabulous. I mean, it was great to see something different, and the racing that those guys put on at that dirt track, half a mile, high speed for the trucks, around there in about 19 seconds for a qualifying lap, and really some good racing on bias-ply tires, which haven't been used in NASCAR since the early to mid-1990s. I thought it was a big leap of faith to do something like that. It could have been a disaster, but it was actually just a great success because everybody pulled together so much and worked so hard to make it one. And I just had a great time being there and soaking up that atmosphere because I haven't seen as electric a crowd for a race in quite some time.
This is kind of a speculative question, I guess, on your part, but do you think this could have actually happened if it hadn't been Tony Stewart's owned Eldora Raceway?
Well, I think the impetus for it would not have been as strong. I know that NASCAR was certainly willing to do it, and actually they've been having ongoing conversations with Tony for a couple of years. But I think if it hadn't been for the fact that Tony had staged the prelude for the Dream for a number of years prior to that and gotten some of the NASCAR stars up to that track, and also it attracted NASCAR brass to come up for the prelude in previous years, which they did because everybody enjoyed that race so much. I think that familiarity certainly bred a probability that was going to happen. And so to make a long answer short, if Tony hadn't been involved, it probably, all the critical mass probably would not have come together like that.
There probably, at least in my mind, there weren't as many Cup drivers involved in this race as I thought maybe there would be, or I think some people might have
way more Cup drivers involved in the Dream races than this one. Yeah,
than in this. Did that surprise you at all? And do you think that after this show was successful as it was, it might next year lead to more Cup drivers being involved?
That's a really good question, and I think it depends on what they do with the schedule. I mean, I think one of the main reasons that you didn't see a lot of Cup drivers involved, number one, Tony would have raced had he not been the track promoter.
Right.
Ryan did race, but this was the off week, the last off week of the year for most of the Cup drivers, and they were scattered to the ends of the earth. Kurt Busch went down to Argentina, other people went elsewhere, and, if it hadn't been the off week, if it had been a midweek race during between two stops on the schedule, I think you might have seen more. But as it was right smack in the middle of the only vacation these guys are going to get before the end of November.
We're talking with Reid Spencer, who writes for NASCAR Wire Services, and we have the great part of the weekend and the part now that not so great. The show at Indy continues, in my mind, to go down year after year. The crowds are down. The spectacle seems to be much less. Before we get into talking about this race, do you see an inevitable taking this thing off the schedule, or is that race there forever?
Well, I don't know about forever, but I don't see it leaving the schedule anytime soon because, for one thing, it means a lot to the drivers. It means a lot to them to go into Indianapolis Motor Speedway and race because of the cachet and because of the history. So, I think that it would be an unpopular move among the drivers to take it off the schedule. Now, you've got a whole wide-ranging discussion about ways in which you could make the racing, appear better, but I think that just fundamentally, for a stock car, as you see many, many times, it's pretty much a one-groove racetrack. And you do have the aero push factor because these guys are running at the maximum speed. And, you know, regardless of what Tony Stewart says after the race about racing versus passing, I mean, you know, you want both, and NASCAR wants both, and Brian Francis said he wants both, and that was one of the motivators for the development of the Gen 6 race car. But at Indianapolis, it's a problem with the venue as much as anything else, as much as with the race car, because just the way you have to race around that racetrack, it's as soon as you get position, you go to the bottom of the track and you stay there.
We're talking to Reid Spencer. Reid, my thing about Indy is the racetrack really hasn't changed. I mean, in '94, when Gordon won the first race, it was the same kind of deal. The racetrack was never really a very good stock car racetrack, and they're never going to be able to make it be one. I think the main thing that's changed in the 20 years since the inaugural Brickyard 400 is at that time it was really a big deal that Indy was going to open up and allow stock cars to race there, when the only thing that had ever raced at that racetrack was Indy cars, was Indianapolis, you know, sanctioned open wheel cars raced there. Since that time, though, we've got Formula One cars racing there. We've got Grand Am cars. We've got Nationwide Series cars. We've got motorcycles racing at Indy. It's not an exclusive racetrack anymore, and I don't know whose fault that is. I don't know if that's NASCAR's fault or if that's the George family's fault, but they've screwed it up and created a non-event out of what used to be, in my mind, one of the top 4 events on the schedule. Am I wrong? I mean, I there's something missing, and it's been missing for more than just a couple of years.
No, I mean, I agree with you, and I think obviously things got exacerbated back in 2008 with the tire issues they had in the first year of the car.
It's like they panicked when that happened.
Yeah, although I will say on Goodyear and NASCAR's behalf that they really worked hard in the intervening year to make sure that they didn't have tire problems anymore, and they really solved those pretty much. Yeah. But that left an impression in everybody's mind that still lingers, I believe. And I agree with you that bringing the Nationwide Series to Indianapolis and bringing the Grand Am cars in and all the other disciplines, I mean, that's, you know, everybody's complicit in that because they simply want more days at the Speedway where they can make money. But it certainly has taken the exclusivity away and taken the uniqueness away when it was simply 2 events, when it was simply IndyCar and then in '94 NASCAR. Then there was still cachet, I think, and I think we lost some of that. I agree with you.
One of the other things I think, Reid, that is kind of missing from this race, which I remember from that 94, 95, 96 era, was guys would show up at that race. You know, they found a stock car somewhere, and, you know, they would show up.
Right.
You know, AJ would show up. I don't know. I'd have to go down the list, but, you know, guys like Tony Bentonhausen, for just throw out a name. But guys who you didn't normally see there would find a stock car and go and try and qualify for that race. And now, again, we're back to same old. You got 43, 44, 45 guys that show up, and they're the same 45 guys. Again, there's nothing special about this race for somebody else to come in and want to try and qualify for it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. But, you know, I think that there are more limiting factors now in terms of outside guys coming in and trying to qualify. I mean, if they could get an established ride with somebody, that would be one thing. For instance, if the 55 car were open for somebody for a race or something like that, something with a guaranteed starting spot. But you've got to be among the top 36 now to get to lock in, and then everybody else with under points behind that gets provisional. So, you know, if you're not in the top 36 off the bat, then and you're a new guy, you're not going to make the race. So that's a limiting factor as well.
So that opens up that whole other question: is that, you know, as NASCAR just over, you know, kind of screwed the pooch on this thing, because that top 36 thing, that's what stops these guys from those outsiders from trying to get in. I mean, that exactly what you just said is what keeps new faces from jumping in, which I think I don't want to do this, I don't want to date myself too much, but I do think that's part of the reason that these races have lost some of their appeal. And it's not all that's not it, but it's like a compilation of all of these factors have made them. It's just another race kind of deal, and I don't know how NASCAR digs out of that hole.
Well, and also I will say that for a guy that coming in who doesn't, or a guy or a gal coming in who doesn't normally drive a stock car,
yeah,
it's much harder to drive these cars up at maximum speed where these guys are than it used to be. I mean, you can't just jump in the car and manhandle the car the way AJ or Mario Andretti used to do in the old days.
Right.
It doesn't work that way. I mean, you really have to have a language all your own with your crew chief that's honed over repetition, and in order to get the cars competitive, it's something that you really have to do on a regular basis. I don't see anybody just getting in one of these cars and being competitive on it just off the bat, because it just doesn't happen that way anymore.
Okay, enough of my bitching about NASCAR. What do you? We're a little bit better than halfway through the season. We're getting close now to chase time. Talking to Reid Spencer from NASCAR Media. Reid, who do you think who's been a surprise to you this year, and what do you look for between now and the time that we cut it off for the chase?
Well, I mean, as far as surprises go, I'm surprised Clint Boyer hasn't won a race.
Yeah, me too.
I'm surprised that at this point that Jeff Gordon hasn't won a race because he's had good cars, just had terrible luck. I'm surprised that Denny Hamlin is still in the race car.
Yeah, exactly.
Because this would have been a perfect opportunity for him to get his back problems fixed with a long time to recuperate.
Yeah.
But he's a competitor, and as you know, no driver wants to get out of the car. It's the Wally Pipp syndrome from baseball, where he gave way to Lou Gehrig and never got his job back. So that's sort of the innate fear in every race car driver, that they're going to get out of the car and somebody else is going to do a better job. So Denny is still in the car. I think over the next 6 races, before the chase is settled, we're going to see a mad scramble, because there are so many people that are on the cusp, either just in or just out, that it's really going to be wild over the next 6 weeks. And, I couldn't tell you who's going to be in and out at this point, although I think Jeff Gordon probably will find a way to be in the chase. But you also have a situation here where Tony Stewart right now is one of the wild cards. If he jumps into the top 10, he can get his other driver, Ryan Newman, into the chase as a wild card as things stand now, except he just fired Ryan. And so we'll see how it all shakes out, but I think it's going to be really wild and really interesting over the next 6 weeks.
Well, we have time for one more question, Reid, and you led into it just perfectly.
And we've got 13 more to ask you, but we
only got time for one. Ryan Newman just won a race after getting fired by his boss. What's your feeling? Where do you think Ryan's going to end up next year? I mean, I have to believe he would have been in demand, but I think he probably just bumped up the ticket a little bit this weekend.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, talk about adding a nice little bullet point to your resume.
Yeah.
He has now won the 2 biggest races in NASCAR. He won the 50th Daytona 500 back in 2008. He now won the 20th Brickyard. And, I think that's going to certainly help him. I would say that, although there is competition and although there is uncertainty over there, that his best option right now is probably Richard Childress Racing.
Yeah. Okay.
Although I will say, though, that he did have conversations with Roger Penske during the off season. Brian had the Quicken Loans money in his pocket, and he and Roger talked about running a third cup car over there. It did not work out because the finances just simply weren't enough to support it. But now that Ryan's got this win in his pocket, the possible chase berth. I think he also is probably, just from the hemming and hawing that Matt Borland did in the post race when we asked him about what his status at Stewart Haas was, I think that he and Ryan may be a package deal. And of course, they had their greatest success over at Penske together. So, I wouldn't rule that out, even though that's just a sort of a wild hair as far as I'm concerned. But, if I'm Roger Penske, if I'm Ryan Newman, I might at least have a conversation.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think Ryan won 10 races for Penske one year.
All right,
All right.
Reid, we're gonna sneak one more in here because I can. So I got to get you to this in 1 minute. Who's buying the 51? Who's going to be the driver, and who's going to be the sponsor?
The 51?
Yeah.
Well, here's the probability there. Harry Scott's buying it, and from the Turner Scott Motorsports partnership, and I believe, at least for a limited schedule, as my wife Lee has already reported, that Justin Allgaier is going to be in the car with Brandt sponsorship, at least for part of the season.
All right. Thank you so much. We, like we said, we had 13 more questions to go. We snuck 2 more in. We'll talk to you again, Reid. Thanks so much for spending time with us. Go Tigers, go Cardinals.
Absolutely. Thanks, Stephen, Charlie.
All right. See you, Reid.
Take care, Reid.
Reid Spencer, one of the best.